Hey Gravity, it's Jessica. I am super excited to be able to present to you today. In times like this where, we can't meet, technology is really great because we can see each other on Zoom, or we can do things like this and still be able to dive into the Bible and really learn about who God is and everything He's done. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity to come to you through video. Today's lesson is a more serious lesson. We're going to be talking about the crucifixion. Okay, so as y'all know, Easter's coming up. And Easter is a time where we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and the victory His resurrection brought for us. And that's a really awesome, that's awesome, right? It's a really cool thing, but I feel like sometimes we kind of gloss over He died, but He rose again. We kind of gloss over the death part a little bit. Not that it's not important and not that people don't find it important. It's just, it's hard to talk about. And that's one thing I learned really studying this, is that it is hard to learn about. It's hard to study. It's hard because there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of injustice. There's a lot of pain, and we're going to really kind of dive into that today. So I'll just kind of jump right in. You know what? Before I jump in, I really want to say, I know you're at home, and I know that it's really easy to be distracted. So just do your best to focus on what we're talking about today. If you want to follow along in your Bible, you can. I'll be reading from it, but I have these little tabs. I don't know if that was in the shot or not because the phone is propped up by an aerosol can. So I have my little tabby, so I'll be flipping through really fast. But if you want to follow along, I'll have verses, or if you want to at least write them down, I'll have verses for you guys. Another thing, just a quick tidbit about the scriptures today is that I'll be in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are the apostles. So I'll be in the New Testament today. I'll be flipping back and forth because all of them have different accounts of Jesus's crucifixion and the days leading up to it and the days following. They all have different accounts. There's a lot of similarities, but some of them have different notes or different, they emphasize something differently, and I think that's really cool. It's like putting a puzzle together. You have all these little pieces that you have to kind of form yourself. So if you do want to study it in your own time, that's where I get a lot of my information is from those books. Specifically, I'll be in Matthew and Luke today. I think I have a couple verses in John, and let's see. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it that I'll be using today, but all those books will have some sort of depiction of the crucifixion. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. So where I'm going to start is before Jesus is arrested. Okay, so before Jesus is arrested, one major event happened that we're gonna kind of so it's the Passover feast. So what happens is the Passover, just so y'all know, is a celebration of the liberation of the Israelites from Egypt. Okay, so they're celebrating when Moses delivered the when Moses delivered the Israelites from Egypt. Okay, that's the celebration of the Passover, and this happened right before Jesus was arrested. So Jesus and the apostles gathered together, and they decided, hey, we're going to do a Passover feast. And a couple of important things happened in this Passover feast that I want to make note of. So one, Jesus officiated the first communion, remembering Jesus' sacrifice. Whenever you take communion at church, you're getting the piece of bread, the little wafer, and then you're getting a little bit of grape juice, and you're breaking the bread and you're eating it, and you're drinking the wine, which the wine signifies the blood of Jesus that was shed for you, and the bread signifies the body of Jesus, which was broken for you. So that's kind of what he's doing. He's subtly hinting to his apostles what's going to happen next. Another thing that happened is that he predicted the betrayal by one of his disciples. And of course, all of them are like, that's not me, Jesus. Who are you talking about? but he had predicted that. And then another thing that happened that's kind of more of a smaller note is that he told Peter, he kind of predicted, hey, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. Because Peter was like, well, I wouldn't betray you. And he was like, well, you know, not in the way that I'm talking about, but you are going to deny me 3 times. And of course, Peter's like, nah, not me, Jesus. Anyway, so after this feast is over, after he's done hanging out with the apostles, he takes 3 people with him to the Garden of Gethsemane. He takes the sons of Zebedee, and that's James and John, if y'all don't know. Okay, so he takes them to this garden, right? Now, the Garden of Gethsemane, or also referred to as the Mount of Olives, is a pretty important place to Jesus. It's a place where he goes to pray often. Throughout his years of ministry, it's actually depicted as some place where he'll go either away from the disciples or he'll go just to pray. It's kind of like his special place. Okay, so they go to the garden, and he leaves the disciples to pray. So he leaves the disciples to kind of hang out and pray while he goes and prays by himself, okay? Now, just a side note, if you guys do read Matthew and Luke specifically, I'm going to be more in Luke on this one because the things I want to emphasize more are depicted better in Luke. In Matthew, it kind of talks about how he has to stop several times and go and chastise the disciples because on their own, and they're sleeping. So there's a couple times where he stops and he has to go, but I really want to talk about the prayers, the prayer time he had, more specifically without the breaks. So just a side note for you guys at home. Okay, so as he prays, he's becoming more and more agonized. So here's Jesus' mindset at the moment. So he just did the first communion where he's talking about breaking the bread and drinking the blood, you know, or breaking the bread and drinking the wine, which he knows signifies the body and the blood, right? So he already kind of knows unsurmountable wrath. He's going to face something really painful. He's going to have to go through something that's really difficult. And difficult is just, I feel like that's not that doesn't even really characterize how bad what's going to happen is. You know what I mean? So he's becoming agonized. And the agony and stress that he's having right now it's not from like, oh, I don't want to do this, I'm not going to do this. It's more of he's stressed because he doesn't know exactly what's going to come. But even in his agony, he willingly yields himself to God's will. It says in Matthew 26:39, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, but you will." So he's praying, he's in agony, he's pouring his heart out to God. He's saying, Lord, I know what's going to happen. I know whatever is going to be done is going to be painful. It's going to be necessary. And I'm just kind of worried about it. Like, I'm worried about what is it going to entail? Can I do this? Things like that. And even in that agony, he's still saying, you know, even if it is the worst pain imaginable, even if it is horrendous, I'm still going to do it because it's your will, not mine. So there was never a moment of him doubting God. There was never a moment of him saying, I'm not going to do it, or bowing out. You know, sometimes when things get hard, we want to run. And he was never at that point where he was like, yeah, I'm going to run. Okay. So let's see where I am. Okay, Luke 22:44. I wanted to really highlight this point because this really shows how much agony he was in. And being in agony or anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Now, this is a really interesting point. A lot of people, like, when I first was studying this, I was wondering, I was like, do they mean literally? Like, was there literal blood, or did they mean it like a metaphor? Like, oh my gosh, he was praying so hard he started sweating blood, you know? Like, is that real? Well, it is real. It's a real condition. It's called hematidrosis. It's extremely rare, only seen like a handful of times, and it's whenever you're under such extreme anxiety or stress or agony so you have a bunch of like sweat pores or whatever, glands. Well, around those pores are little tiny capillaries, okay? And so what happens is that your body starts to stress out those capillaries, and it's kind of like putting your hand, like my drink, it's V8, very, very nutritious. So it's like putting your hand on that. Do you see how it's starting to bend the can? It's kind of like that. So all this stress is straining those capillaries, and all of a sudden blood starts kind of coming from them. Blood starts dripping out of the pores, and it's sweating blood is the, not medical term. So that's what happens, is that your body is so stressed. Have y'all ever been so stressed? Like, I do this all the time, where I stress myself out and then I get like a tummy ache or I get a headache. It's kind of like that. It has this an effect on your body, and this is such an extreme amount of stress that it has such an extreme result on your body. Okay, so he's in a lot of agony. He's really going hard on this prayer. Okay, so after he finishes his prayer, he is greeted by his betrayer. So let's talk about Judas. Judas is an apostle. He's one of the 12, the original 12. And he agreed to betray Jesus for 30 silver coins. And I'm actually going to read this part of the scripture. Gosh, words today. Hello. Because I thought it was a really interesting part, so I'm going to read it. We're going to be in Luke 22, 3 through 6. Okay, Luke 22, 3 through 6. Then Satan entered Judas, surnamed, and I can't say this because Iscariot, I don't know, who was numbered among the 12. So he went his way and conferred with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he promised and sought opportunity to betray him, Jesus, to them in the absence of the multitude. So basically, the reason why I want to read this is Judas was real sneaky. He put on the sneaky sneaks, because he literally went and sought out the people that wanted Jesus dead and gone. He went and sought them out and said, hey, how much would you give me if I bring you Jesus, or I give you Jesus? And they're like, dude, what do you want? We'll give you 30 silver coins. And he's like, deal. That's how much Jesus was worth to him. I thought that was really interesting, because I feel like some of the, a lot of people that kind of know a little bit about the story but haven't really studied it, a lot of people get the impression like he was approached and he was tempted. But in Luke, it's saying, no, he went and sought this out. So I thought that was a pretty good point to make, is that Judas, he truly went and looked for it. Does that make sense? I think that's a big difference. That Judas willingly did this. He did this and he sought it out, versus they came to him, they tempted him, they said, hey, we'll do this, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. He actually went to them. I don't know, that to me, that was like a real eye-opener for me. Okay, so now we're back in the garden. Let's go back to the garden. So Jesus comes down from praying, and then here comes Judas. And Judas basically tells the multitude, which is like chief priests, elders, soldiers, people that are armed. They're all armed. And he says, okay, y'all hang out here, y'all chill. I'm going to go and find Jesus. And when you see me greet the man with a kiss, that's the man you are supposed to arrest. Okay, so he goes and he finds Jesus, and he says, greetings, Rabbi, and he kisses him on the cheek. And then the crowd kind of descends on him. And I do have pictures. So Shabby said he's going to edit in the pictures. So slide 2, Shabby. It's going to be right here somewhere in this area, I think. I hope that's the right area. I forgot which. I think it's here. Okay, so we'll put the second picture there, but it's basically depicting Jesus getting arrested by the multitude. Okay. John 18:12 depicts the arrest, and it says, then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. After he's arrested, the disciples fled, and Peter then later in turn denied Jesus 3 times, like Jesus predicted he would. Okay, the trials of Jesus. So slide 3. up here. I really hope this is the right direction. Right here. Slide 3. Jesus is brought directly to the Sanhedrin. Now, the Sanhedrin is the Jewish court system at the time. It's made up of religious officials, okay? So I'm going to read Matthew 26, 57, and then 59 through 68, okay? All right. So Matthew 26, 57, that's this page. Okay. So, and those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were also assembled. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But the last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days." And then the high priest arose and said to him, "Do you answer to nothing? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, "I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus said to him, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man," he's referring to himself, "sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered and said, "He is deserving of death." Then they spat in his face and beat him, and the others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ." So let's break this down a little bit. These guys want Jesus gone so badly. They want him dead, that they're looking for people to falsely testify against him. And so they kind of have these people come up, but nothing really pans out. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But the last 2 people that come to testify say the same exact thing. They bring the same accusation forward, that he said, I can, he told me I could destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. And then the high priest is kind of like over all this false testimony, but he basically kind of comes at Jesus and says, "Okay, I am telling you I'm putting you under oath by the living God," so he's required to answer because he's bound by oath to the living God, "to tell me if you are the Son of God," to which Jesus basically answers in a very eloquent way, "Yeah, I am, and you're going to see me sitting at the right hand." And so the high priest was like, "Forget all the false testimony, forget all the witnesses, that right there is enough for us to sentence you to death." And so he just kind of ignores the fact that most of those false testimonies were just that, false, and they really didn't pan out, and was like, nah, he just said it, y'all heard him, arrest him, you're dead, son. That's pretty much what happened. And then once they kind of put forth the execution of death, they all come and they beat him and they spit on him and they mock him, which is just, gosh, it's just so awful. So fun fact, not fun, fact about the Sanhedrin. So the Sanhedrin, because they're a religious kind of court system, they're a Jewish court system, they couldn't carry out execution orders. So they could sentence to the governor, the Roman governor of that area. So the governor there is Pontius Pilate. So they have to send him to Pontius Pilate in order for Pontius Pilate to still to carry forth that sentencing, but it's kind of like a second trial. So next slide, right here, Jesus before Pilate. I'm going to kind of read this first because I think it's pretty, I like the way that it's written. So we're going to go to Matthew 27:11. 27:11, is it on this page? Yes. Okay. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said to him, "It is as you say." And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he answered him with not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. So basically, Jesus is brought to Pilate. Pilate's questioning him. He's not really giving a whole lot of answers. He's kind of pretty tight-lipped about it. And so the governor, it says, marveled greatly. Okay, so now we kind of move on a little bit. So in Matthew 27:18, it says, he knew they handed him, being Jesus, over because of envy. Some say out of self-interest. So, okay, Pilate kind of is in the know. He kind of realizes that this guy might not be as bad as these people are saying he is, and that he might not have done all the things that they're saying he's done. Out of self-interest, because Jesus' teachings, who he was, who he truly was, like the Messiah, really threatened their way of life. It threatened their authority. It threatened their social standing. It threatened their teachings, because a lot of their teachings kind of combated against Jesus's, because it was all about religious regulations and law. There was no real love there. So that's kind of where Pilate is. He kind of realizes, okay, well, they really want him dead, but I kind of know that something's fishy here. So Pilate decides that because of Passover, there's festivals and everything, right? Well, one of the customs during these festivals is that the governor gets to pick, not the governor specifically, but the governor gets 2 prisoners, and he has the crowd pick which one they want freed. Okay, the other one is put to death. Now, Pilate kind of has this is kind of like his way out. This is a way where he can kind of give the crowd one more chance to free Jesus and to undo what they're, the injustice that they're doing. But it's also his way of keeping his hands clean, because if Jesus ends up dying, it's not on him. So he says, okay, well, it's up to you, the crowd. So he brings out Jesus, and then he brings out this man named Barabbas. Now let's talk about Barabbas. Barabbas is the worst of the worst. He is a murderer. He is a rapist. He's a thief. He is awful. He's like the worst person morally, right? And everyone hates him because of all the damage he's done to people and to families and to villages. He's the worst, right? Okay, so they have Barabbas and Jesus, and I'm sure in his head, not that it says this, but I'm sure in his head he's like, surely they're gonna pick Barabbas to send to death, because, are you kidding? Why would you release this dude? Well, let's read. Let's read and see what the crowd says. Matthew 27:21 through 26. Okay. The governor answered and said to them, which of the 2 do you want me to release to you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, what shall I do with with Jesus, who is called Christ? They all said, let him be crucified. Then the governor said, why? What evil has he done? But they cried out all the more, saying, let him be crucified. And when Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather an uproar was rising, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it. And the people answered and said, his blood be on us and on our children. And then he released Barabbas to them, and he had Jesus scourged. That's intense to me. Because even Pilate was like, are you guys sure? What has he done compared to this dude? Like, are you guys really sure? But this is how insatiable the crowd was. The religious leaders, the people in this crowd. Literally a week ago, or not a week ago, but a couple days ago, they revered him as Messiah. They greeted him as a king into their city, on Palm Sunday. And now they're literally so excited that he's gonna die. They don't care that it's, there's no real justification for it, other than the religious leaders just don't like him. No one's really digging into this. There's no reporter going, okay, well, let's look at the facts. They don't care. They just want him dead. And to me, that's just so, it's just so sad. Okay, so let's see. Now we're moving on to kind of the more difficult part to kind of get through. So we're going to talk about the scourging or the flogging. And some versions of the Bible talks about it being called the flogging, and sometimes it's referred to as the scourging. They both mean the same thing. It's technically it's kind of like a preliminary punishment for people who are getting crucified. Okay, so slide number 5 is up here. and it should show you what the whips look like. So these whips are called flagrums. It's a small whip with 9 heavy leather straps. Okay, think of heavy leather, not like your leather jacket at home or something. Like, it's like a heavy, kind of like a belt. Think of, you know, embedded with small bone fragments, metal balls, or hooks or glass on the ends. So in those pictures, you should see kind of like the little pieces of shards of whatever it is that they could use to cause some damage, right? So that's what a flagram is, and that's what they use. So I'm going to show you a video here in a minute, showing you the damage that these flagrams cause. But let me kind of explain to you how they have Jesus. So they have this post in the middle of this like very small arena, and remember, this is all public, so there are people watching this, which to me, I can't even imagine seeing this happen to somebody, let alone be excited for it. The idea just makes me sick to my stomach. But they strip Jesus down, they tie him to a post with his arms kind of stretched out, and his back is kind of exposed. And well, kind of exposed, it is exposed to them. And they want to make sure that the skin is as tight as possible. You know, when you stretch your arms out and that skin becomes real tight, that's kind of what they're going for here. And that's kind of how they have him set up, right? Just kind of a little background to the laws here. The laws stated that you could not exceed 40 lashes. So one soldier would do 40 lashes on somebody, but you couldn't do any more. Well, with as bloodthirsty as this crowd was and these guards were, I believe that it was probably a lot more than 40. And you'll see why that's so detrimental and why even 40 is unthinkable when you watch this video. Just to kind of set up the video, it is, they have like this thing of ham, right? Cooked ham, and it has the skin on it. I work in the animal field. I'm a veterinary technician, and I've worked on livestock, and I've worked on farm animals. Pigs have really thick hide, okay? They have really thick skin, a lot thicker than ours. And the damage that this flagram that this man uses in the video, the damage that it does, I want y'all to count how many times he hits that ham before it starts to open the skin. I just want y'all to imagine it being a person. I know this is really intense. Imagine it being a person, because your skin is a lot thinner, right? Your skin paper cut very easily. Paper cuts us. It's not gonna cut it. It's not gonna cut a cow or a pig as easily. But imagine 40 lashes on a person, and again, count how many lashes it takes to do damage to the pig skin. After I saw this video, that was another game changer for me. So this is the part where he'll insert the video. Please watch it. Please count how many times you see before it kind of starts to do damage, and then we'll move on. So after watching that video, y'all kind of see how bad it is, right? I mean, I think I counted like the third or fourth whipping that you saw the ham start to kind of come out. Imagine that being tissue and muscle on a person. And of course, this is a grown goal. This isn't some like random dude. Okay, you know, it's not me with my little noodle arms. It's this big guy who is wailing on his back with this torturous device. There is no words. Like, it's like, I can't really even describe how much pain that must be. I've never felt a pain like that. I don't think anyone at home here watching probably has. It's extremely painful. I read medical journals. The biggest help that I've had doing this study is from this book, The Cross and the Shroud, by Frederick T. Ziggy, I believe that's how it's pronounced. I may be wrong, but he is one of the lead U.S. pathologists or something, or forensic expert, and he talked about how that his back probably resembled ground beef. Y'all seen ground beef? That's what his back looked like. It's just a mess of tissue and muscle and skin and blood. Okay, let's move on. So after the act of flogging, the guards decide that they want to have a little bit of fun. You know, that's what one wants to do after tearing a person apart. They want to have a little bit of fun. So they kind of do a mock coronation. And if you know what a coronation is, it's basically where they put a crown on a person and say, now you're a king. It's like a fancy ceremony, okay? I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but whatever. So they robe him, right? They put probably a cheap linen robe that they found on the ground or something, and they fashioned a crown of thorns to place on his head. And they yelled out, "Hail the King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and they struck him. Let's kind of dive into this a little bit because I really want to drive this point home. Slide 6, right here. I don't know why I keep having to gesture to it, but the crown of thorns. Okay, so I did a little bit of studying on this. It's going to get real scientific, guys. Based on the region that this happened and the region that they were in, there was two possibilities for thorns that were used for this crown, right? It's either the Syrian Christ thorn or Christ's thorn. The Syrian Christ thorn on the picture is the one that looks longer, and then the Christ thorn is the one that appears kind of shorter. Well, let me guarantee you, these are not like thorns on a rose. These are extremely thick and durable, and they're extremely sharp. The Syrian Christ thorn, I think, can grow up to inches long, and then Christ thorn is a little bit shorter, but it's thicker. So either way, a ton of damage. And imagine this. So they make this thorn, this crown of thorns, right? Well, they're not going to just make this little dainty ringlet, like, you know how girls make those little flower headbands or whatever, and they're like, oh, look at this, it's so pretty. No, it's not gonna look like that. It's not gonna be this little tiara of thorns. It's probably this big mess of thorns that they were like trying to kind of fashion into a crown shape. The way that it's depicted in a lot of pictures and stuff is that it's probably like this, like, really neatly made crown of thorns that they just shoved on his head. I think it's like a mess of thorns that slightly resembled a crown. I don't think the Roman guards really put a whole lot of time into this. And so they take this crown and they shove it down on his head, right? Well, why do they shove it? It's not like they're going to place it very gently and be like, oh, look at you, haha. No, they're going to shove it on his head. They want this crown to stay. So those thorns impale into his face, right, into the skin. They want it to stay. And just kind of a side note, I won't go too deep into this. I have in the past, so if you have questions, I guess you can ask, just text me or message me or whatever. Facial nerves. One of them is called a trigeminal or something like that. I had to watch a pronunciation video and I still haven't gotten it down, obviously. But it's a nerve that causes like fire-like pain. And if you damage it, you can damage it from getting facial trauma. So like thorns going into your face and into your temples and all to those sensitive areas. It's extremely painful. And this particular nerve that I was talking about, the trigeminal nerve, is it's actually, if you look it up, Mayo Clinic or on any of those websites, it says that it's described as the most painful thing that a human being has experienced. The most extreme pain. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the way it's described when people have it, I'm sure. So, and not only that, your face also contains a lot of blood vessels. So he's bleeding, not only bleeding out from his back, and probably bleeding out from areas on his face where he was punched and he slapped. And the guards also, I didn't say this earlier, but they also pulled out bits of his beard. Can you imagine, like, you have your hair, right? Nice hair, and someone just takes a big wad and rips it out of your head? I can't even imagine how painful that is. Let alone your face, which I feel like your face is so much more sensitive than your scalp, you know? Anyway, there's lots of blood vessels in your face, so he's bleeding pretty profusely everywhere. He has a lot of lacerations. He's pretty beat up at this point. Okay, so let's move on. Slide 7 up here somewhere. I feel like it's like the Disney Channel where they're like, you know, but it's like, slide. I don't know. Okay. Trek. So part of the crucifixion process is that they do the flogging, they get the cross ready, and then they expect the person who just received the flogging, the criminal, to carry their cross all the way to where they're going to be crucified. In this particular case, it was from Antonia, which is where all this is happening, right, to Golgotha, which is over here, right? So it's archived as an uphill walk. So not only is Jesus having to go pretty far to get there, which they measured it about 650 yards, so that's over half a mile, I believe. Yeah, over a half a mile, which doesn't seem terrible when you say it, but imagine being as broken as he was and having a back full of ground beef and not being able to see right because blood is gushing into your eyes and you have thorns impaling your face. It's pretty rough. That is probably even unthinkable to try and do that. But nevertheless, he did it. Okay, so it's archived as an uphill walk. So he's going uphill. He's having to carry this. Now, let's talk about the cross that he has to carry. Historians, whether he carried, I'm trying to think of a, oh, here, hold on. Okay, so I don't have a little mini cross. I didn't think about it. So, okay. So, here's your cross, right? Okay, so a lot of historians believe that he didn't just carry the whole cross. Some people think that he just carried the little cross piece that goes across like this, right? And kind of carried it like over his shoulder, like that. Now, the cross piece would weigh about anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds. And that, to me, I mean, again, think about the condition he's in. That's incredible. I can't imagine carrying even 50 pounds in any kind of altered state or injured state, carrying that half mile straight without having to drop it, without any help. So that's the cross piece. Now, if he carried the whole cross, which I find, I don't know, I find it a little less likely, but who knows, you know, there's a lot of debate here. It would weigh about 600 pounds, and it would be anywhere from 6 to 9 feet tall. So just for giggles, let's say it would be 7 feet tall, and about, let's say, it says up to 600 pounds or around 600 pounds, so let's say 500 pounds. Let's just say 500, right? 500 pounds is probably the size of a teenage lion. That's crazy. Even if it was 50 pounds, even if it was whatever, and even being that tall, It's hard to imagine doing that in his state. Anyway, the wood that they used for these crosses, if you see crosses like around our church, like we have a cross over there on our back wall, and it's pretty smooth, right? It's smooth wood, it's polished, it's, you know, sanded down. They didn't do that for these criminals. They didn't get them a nice pretty cross to stand on or to be nailed to. They got rough wood that they didn't do anything with. They just basically got some wood from a tree, kind of fashioned it into a cross shape, and then there you go. Imagine having not only to carry something that's extremely heavy, or heavy for you in your state because you're in a weakened state, but it's splintered. And it's poking into your wounds, and it's poking into your back as you try to drag this thing over a half mile to where you gotta go. That's crazy. Okay, so let's move on. The fall. Okay, so under the weight of the cross, Jesus falls. Okay, and a Roman centurion, which is a Roman commander, instructs a man who is Simon of Cyrene to help carry the cross. Keep in mind that in this time where Jesus falls and this man comes to help him, Jesus falls twice more before reaching his destination, but the whole time people are spitting at him. There's like just lined with people yelling at him, yelling insults and mocking him and just terrible things, and I'm sure throwing things at him the whole time. Okay, so he reaches Golgotha, which is where Jesus will be crucified. Now, Frederick Zugaby, I always have to think about how to pronounce his name, notated in his medical journal that by the time Jesus had reached Golgotha, the brutality of the scourging would have some really severe effects, and by the time he reached Golgotha, Jesus would begin feeling these effects. One of them would be shortness of breath. And something that would happen with this kind of trauma to his back, and even just being beat and have severe beatings, is that you could probably get something called pulmonary edema. So pulmonary edema is basically the accumulation of fluid in your lungs, and it makes you feel like you can't take a breath, right? Have you ever felt that way, where you have a hard time catching your breath? That's what he was feeling, and it doesn't stop. It actually gets a whole lot worse before he passes. Okay, so the nails. I have a nail. I was gonna do a magic trick, but I couldn't find like a revealing thing. I don't know. This is a Roman nail. I just put it up to like my face for size, or I'll do what the beauty gurus do on like the YouTube, right? This is a replica of an average Roman nail. Okay, iron, made out of iron. It's about 7 to 9 inches long. This is basically what they used, right here. Now, there's a lot of debates with the nailing of Jesus and whether or not the nail was put in his palm or put in his wrist, okay? Now, there is a documented physician named Barbet who experimented on cadavers to kind of figure it out. And basically, through all his research, he kind of concluded that it was more likely put in his wrist than his hand, because the skin in your hand is really, if you kind of feel it, it's kind of like your wrist, it feels sturdier than your hand, right? You can kind of feel the tendons, you can kind of feel, you know what I mean? Well, he concluded, through his studying, that the skin would tear really easily, because there's a lot of pressure when you're hung up on a cross. There's a lot of pressure on your arms and on your hands, and so it would probably tear through at some point. So it's more likely that the nails were put in his wrist, okay? At home, I want you to grab your wrist. I want you to move it around. I want you to kind of touch on it, feel it, okay? Now imagine a 7-inch, which is the short end of the nails that they use, like the shorter end, 7 inches of pure iron being nailed into your wrist. That's extremely cringy. Thinking about that is so but that's what happened. Jesus had this nail, or one like it, in his wrists, both of them, onto a cross. I can't imagine the amount of pain that is. And then his feet would have had nails as well. They speculate that they probably used 2 nails just to get, because what they did is they layered the feet. I really wish I could, I don't know if I can really mimic the stature of Jesus, but I'll try. Okay, so Jesus on the cross, so they have his wrists, right, pinned up. Now, they don't put his back flush against it, and I don't think Jesus would have wanted that anyway, because remember, his back is raw. It's pure, like, it's just an open, huge, gaping wound. So he has his back, and he has his, it's kind of like his body's hanging forward, right? So his wrists are up here, his body's kind of hunched over and kind of like in a hunched position, and then his legs are slightly bent. I can do this. I don't know if you can still see me, by the way. So his legs are slightly bent, so he's like this, right? Okay, and then they put his feet on top of each other, so his feet are slightly bent, and his I'm gonna fall. His feet are on top of each other, his legs are slightly bent, and he's like this. Okay, so I don't know if y'all saw that. That may have been, I almost may have fallen for nothing, but I hope y'all did, because it's a really awkward position. I can't hold that position for very long, let alone imagine being nailed in place. Every time I move or adjust, it's immense pain. I can't really breathe well because my lungs are filling with fluid, but now I'm in this awkward position because of how much pain my back is in, and I can't do anything about it. I can't move now that I'm nailed in place. And it says that he would have had to push himself up. So he's like this, right? And he's kind of concave, and he would have to breathe, to even get a little breath. And it's not like he can take deep breaths anyway. But they said that he wouldn't have been able to do that long because he would have lost a lot of that strength. Anyway. Okay, so let's talk more about the 9th hour. The 9th hour, slide 10, please, is kind of the final stretch for him. We've went into a lot of the physical pain. We went into a lot of, or I've tried to kind of describe the physical wounds and lacerations and things that he went through. But let's talk about the emotional pain, because there is some emotional and spiritual pain here that we really haven't focused on, and I want to focus on that. So he was betrayed by Judas. He was deserted by the disciples and denied by Peter. He was mocked by the multitude. He was slandered by the false witnesses. And now, bearing all the sins of man, becoming the perfect sacrifice, God the Father. Now let me explain that last one just a little bit. Way back in the day, the custom was for people to offer up a sacrifice of a pure lamb or creature. I think lamb was ideal, without any blemishes, to kind of push back their sin. Right? It was a way of pushing back their sin so they could stay holy for however long. Right? So Jesus is referred to as our lamb, right? As the perfect sacrificial lamb. He became that sacrifice for all of us. He was the last one. He was the only one we were ever going to need. We weren't going to have to go and find another Jesus to sacrifice a couple. Is that he took on all our sin. That's kind of what the sacrificial lamb did for people back in the day. They would be like, okay, this is a representation of my sin. I'm going to kill it. It's going to keep my sins away for a little bit, and then I'll have to do this again in a year or 6 months or whatever. So Jesus became our perfect sacrifice. He became the embodiment of all of our sin, of everything you have ever done, of that your best friend has ever done, that anybody on this planet has ever done. He became the embodiment of those sins. And wherever there is sin, God cannot be, right? So God turned away. And Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Can you imagine being able to see God and him turning away? The pain that must have been, like how painful it must have been. This man talked to God daily. He was walking with God. He was moving with God. He was God and man in one. And to have God the Father turn away from Jesus the Son, I'm sure that was extremely painful for him. There's a lot of emotions that we don't talk about here, and I don't believe that, none of this stuff, like the being betrayed and all this stuff, I believe that it did have some effect on him. He was still human too. It would affect me. If I had a friend betray me, it would hurt me, right? If I had a friend deny me, if I had a parent deny me, if I had somebody deny me, it's going to hurt me. It would hurt you too. Jesus felt this pain. It wasn't just the physical stuff. He was all, he had to see the people that he was going to die for, the people he loved so dearly, the people that he was willing to heal and willing to teach. He had to see them mock him and spit on him and gosh, I can't words, just really want his death. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of emotions here. And then God the Father turns away because Jesus has to become the embodiment of our sin. Next slide. Tetelestai. Tetelestai is what Jesus' last word was. Tetelestai. It means it is finished. With one final breath, tetelestai. It is finished. After hours of unimaginable pain, Jesus dies. Tetelestai. It is finished. Tetelestai. When I do this lesson in particular, I always want to come up with something different. I never want to teach it the same way twice. And Shabi, with everything going on, he was like, hey, what do you still want to, do it? Like, can you come record? And I was like, of course, that'd be great. He showed Facebook or whatever, and it was called The Journey to the Cross. And he said, hey, is this okay? Does this work for you? And I was like, actually, it's perfect. Journey to the Cross is exactly perfect. Jesus' journey had a result. It had a purpose. Every journey does. I mean, if you think of Lord of the Rings, why did Frodo start this journey? To destroy the ring. He went all this way, all this crazy way, and so the world could be peaceful, right? Jesus' journey didn't just start with the crucifixion. That's not where it started. It started years before that with his ministry, where he healed people, he cast out demons, he raised people from the dead, he gave these teachings, these revelations to the people. It started there. The crucifixion is a big point. It's kind of like coming up to the conclusion of his journey. Like the war, and like, how they have this huge war and Lord of the Rings? It's kind of the same thing. Jesus died for a purpose. His purpose was you. It was for Kara. It was for Gigi. It was for Taylor. It was for Audie. It was for Avi. When he died on that cross, he saw your face. He said, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this so you can come to the Father. I'm doing this so you can spend eternity with the Father. I'm doing this so that you can experience his love. I'm doing this so that you don't have to be a slave to sin. The purpose of his journey, the purpose of his death and his resurrection was to give you victory over death, to give you victory over sin, and so that you could spend an eternity with God. forever. Jesus died for you. So live for him. Get to know him. Talk to him. Read about him. Study what he did. Find out for yourself. Find out who he is for yourself. Do it because there is a man that endured the most painful death, the most torturous things that could ever happen to a person, and he did it for you. Yeah, on that cross, he probably thought of Mary Magdalene, or Peter, or John, or James, but he also thought of you. He thought of Brianna. He thought of Junior. He thought of Brooklyn. He thought of Pastor Akers. He thought of your mom and your dad. Your face is burned into his memory. Your names are written in his book. My encouragement to you is that, one, I want you to study. I want you to get to know him. But I also encourage you to live for him. He gave you this life. If you believe in God and if you accepted Christ into your heart, then you are a follower of Christ. That's how you identify, right? Well, then follow him. Even in the middle of this quarantine, you can still show Christ's love. You can still follow Christ. You can still learn about Christ. Don't waste time. Do what he's commanded us to do. Love one another. Go preach the gospel. And if you don't know how, and you're like, well, I definitely don't know how now, I'm in quarantine. Well, guess what? You have a video camera somewhere, whether it's on your phone or your laptop. Record yourself. Do a message. Do a Bible study. Get on Zoom and do a Bible study with your friends. There's a lot of ways that you can still live for him. And I encourage you, if you haven't accepted Christ into your heart and you haven't made the decision to follow him, I really encourage you to contact Shabi, Audie, or me. We're here to talk to you. We're here to walk you through this. We're here to help you. We're here for questions and all that. But I really encourage y'all to follow him, to talk to him, to build a relationship with him. He's the only one that will ever do anything like this for you in your life. And the only reason that is because he's the only one that could have withstood it. He was God and man. Most normal men would have died before they probably even got to the cross. They probably wouldn't have even if they got to the cross, they wouldn't have lasted as long as Jesus did. Based on studies done by Zigabee and other medical examiners. Jesus endured a lot for you. Get to know him. Because he loves you. He loves you a lot. I'm going to say a prayer. We're going to end. Again, if you have any questions or if you want to learn more and you have questions on where to start, what to do, whatever, please contact us. If you don't have my number, Shabi does. Contact Shabi. Audie does. Contact Audie. But they have really good information too, so you're welcome to contact them too. You know, we all have. We can all help y'all with whatever y'all need. I'm gonna go ahead and end in prayer. With everything going on, I do feel it is beneficial for us to pray for, healthcare workers and people in essential services that are out there and that are having to help fight the issue going around. So we're going to pray for them, pray for safety, and Father God, Lord, just thank you so much, God, for allowing us to learn more about you, to learn about what your son went through and what he was willing to do for us, God, so that we could know you, so that we could love you, so that we could be with you forever, God. I thank you so much, Lord, and I pray that it has some impact on the students, God. I pray it has impact on the adults watching, and that maybe it really reignites something in everybody, Father. Lord, I lift up to you uncertainty. Lord, I lift up to you all the healthcare workers, all the people that are on the front lines fighting this virus, God. I pray, Lord, for your hand to be over all of them and for safety and for health. I pray that there is a way to defeat this virus, Lord, and to get people to be healthy. And I pray, Lord, that the mortality rate drops significantly, God. And I pray for everyone at home, Lord, that, it's a hard time. Some people are losing their jobs. Some people are stressed. And I'm sure being stuck in a house with a bunch of people, it's stressful situations. And I pray, Lord, for peace. And I pray that this is a time where even though we get irritated and even though we're stressed and frustrated, God, I pray that we are still able to unify and to love on each other and to be kind to one another, God. I pray that in this time that we find ways to grow closer to you, God, to really still spread your message, reach people that we haven't reached before, God. I pray, Lord, that we really use technology to our advantage in this time, because I feel like that's what it was meant for when you allowed us to create it, God, is that to reach people, to get to speak to people, even though we wouldn't be able to go ourselves, Lord. We can still send our image, Father God. We can still send our words, Father God, and to speak life into others, God. And I pray that we really take a hold of that, God, and answer that call to continue to spread your word to everybody. And Lord, I just really pray that if there's anyone watching, God, that was really struck by our message, Lord, but hasn't accepted you yet, I pray, Lord, that you really work on their hearts, God. And I pray, God, that you give them the courage to reach out to Shabby or reach out to a leader, or and just kind of ask for more information and accept you, Father God, into their hearts. And Lord, again, I thank you so much. I thank you for the opportunity, and I thank you that you're here and you're working and you're moving, even though a lot of people may not see it and a lot of people may be losing hope, Father God, that you are still God, and you never let the storms move out of your control, God. You are always in control. And I just thank you for that, God. I thank you for your mighty hand over all of us. And I just pray for continued health and protection, Father God. And thank you so much, Lord. We love you. Amen. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really hope that we get to meet soon. And if not, then we'll still continue forward and recording our messages and doing the Zoom activities and all that. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. And if you guys need anything at all, please feel free to contact me. We love y'all, and we want y'all to be safe, and we miss y'all. So, yeah. But anyway, this is Jessica out. It's like the worst way to end a sermon, but okay.